Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 437, recorded live on Sunday, July 24th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have some regulars returning. We have Asheras from the Lava Divers on Kyber.
Hey, thanks for having me today.
Yeah, welcome back. And then we have our resident Druid specialist, Voodu from the High Lords of Malkir on Starlona.
Woohoo! I'm a regular now. Hey, everyone.
You've been a regular for a long time. I hate to break it to you. The first screenshot for this week is Asheran reads an old tome from the Forbidden Library in the 277th screenshot of the week. Great place to read a tome. They should give you like a little bonus. Maybe like you read a tome faster if you do it in a library. It'd be kind of fun. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can watch us through Twitch, YouTube, the DDO forums, iTunes, or our website at DDOCast.com. DDOCast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network. Shows are usually available within a few days of recording, and the next show will probably be this coming weekend. You can stay updated by following us on Twitter or Facebook. At DDOCast is the one I use the most. But I usually try to post stuff on Facebook as well. Let's see. On the podcast this week, we've got 2 weeks of game news to go over because we missed last week on the show. I had a little bit too much going on, so I decided not to have a show. But we got some game news to go over, some community news to go over, just some general gaming news to go over. There's a little bit of that going on. And we're going to be continuing our discussion, our ongoing series, actually finishing it this week, on spell selection. And we're going to be doing Druids and Rangers this week, which are technically divine casters, but I think they're a little different than your cleric, favored soul, paladin, because there's more of a woodland feel to what they're doing. Does that kind of sound accurate to you guys?
I think so.
Yeah, sure.
And we'll just go ahead and jump right in. We'll start with Druids, starting at level... Well, let's just start kind of big picture with Druids really quick, because there's kind of 2 directions people are generally going to go. The first one is going to be more of a caster type, which is what you generally play, right, Voodu?
That is correct.
The other way you can go, and you could sort of divide this into 2, of wolf or bear form, but more of a melee animal build. Which I would say that in my general experience, it's probably about 50-50 split in the population of druids. There's some people that like to play the animal form, almost exclusively wolf. You don't see very many bears running around, which is very sad. Or casting druids. Usually, at that point, you're going to be doing one of 2, either fire or water savant. Do you want to talk briefly about which one you kind of prefer, Voodu? Water savant or water versus fire elemental?
Well, I'm a big water guy. And by the way, my camera keeps cutting in and out, so sorry about that.
That's okay.
I'm not sure why that's happening. I'm a big water elemental person, and I only use fire elemental situationally. But one of the things that I think is important to emphasize, because I've run into some people over the years, that if you are a caster druid, it's important to run in elemental form, I think, pretty much all the time, because you do get some bonuses, in addition to bonuses to your spells. And you also get like some racial bonuses to like 100% to fortification, a whole bunch of other goodies too. So you definitely want to run in elemental form.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about a video that you had this week later. But I think one thing that you pointed out in that video that is important to note here is if you're in an elemental form, the opposite, you'll get a penalty if you're casting for the opposite type of spells. But that shouldn't prevent you from actually casting those spells. You can still use them. And you can still use them effectively. Yep. So don't feel like you are pigeonholing yourself into one or the other.
That's a very important point.
So with that, we'll start with level 1. What are the spells that you like to use for level 1 spells?
There are two spells that I wanted to mention from the level 1 list. The first one is Produce Flame. And the reason why I want to mention this is because this one gets overlooked and laughed off by a lot of people because it's incredibly slow to reach its target. I mean, it's embarrassingly slow. You can literally outrun it, like if you're hasted. But you can sort of learn to use it. You know, it's actually if you're doing like close quarters combat, you can hit the mob right in front of you, or if there's stationary mobs. I think it's definitely worth, making an effort to learn to use that. Now, for the regular version of the spell, turn all your metas off. It's just not worth maximizing and empowering. It's way too expensive. But an unmaximized, unempowered Produce Flame, like you can spam that and do a few hundred damage or more with that. And then you got your SLA version for like a couple spell points that you can hit for like 500-600 fire damage, for practically free. So I think that's a nice little spell that gets overlooked. And another one, and I'm just gonna say this, I don't use this one, but a lot of people like Entangle because if you heighten it, I hear it can be good crowd control. Druids have so much other crowd control going on, so I don't even bother with it. But I'm just saying, like, you might want to take a look at that. Heighten and Entangle.
Yeah, those are two good spells. You're right. Produce Flame is very often overlooked, and it is kind of comical at times. But I think there's also just a stigma that amongst players that a level 1 damage spell is not going to be worth it once you get your later spells. It's not going to compete and still be viable, which isn't always true.
It's the low cost of Produce Flame that I think makes it worth looking at again.
Another interesting spell at level 1 is the Fairy Fire. It's an evocation spell, and if they fail their reflex save, if they're invised, blurred, or displaced, they'll lose that, which can be helpful. You think of like Giant Hold, for example, and the first thing those shamans do is they displace themselves and everybody else. And, they can be a bear to hit at that point sometimes. So being able to have a level 1 spell you can cast just to get rid of that can be a little helpful. I mean, for a level 1 spot when you're level 13 to 15.
Yeah, it's
useful.
It's not a bad choice either. It's good application. Some other spells out of here. Jump, I think, is just a popular casting spell in general.
Best buff in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think some people would debate haste with you on that. Although I think jump is a little bit more argument. You can debate it a little bit heavier now that you can get a permahaste on melees later in the game. Long Strider can be helpful very early on in early levels, extra 15% run speed without having to find an item. Do you want to mention Ram's Might is helpful? It's a +2 size bonus to strength and damage, which Druids will have something later that will be a better version of that, I believe. But it's a size bonus is a very rare bonus, so you can get a little extra strength that way. And then there's Maul and Takedown, which are bear and wolf spells, respectively. They're coded as spells. They're really more like a special attack that you can't use in a Beholder's anti-magic cone. It's a little weird in that regard. But it's they're basically attacks that do wolf and bear type things. And generally, because I play a wolf build for my druid, I take all the wolf ones I can get generally. And Takedown has a trip effect on it as well, which is kind of nice because it essentially gives you quote improved trip, but for your wolf. But it's also important to note that this is wisdom based instead of strength based. This trip is so. With that, I think we can move on to level 2. What do you guys like out of level 2?
Well, another one that I would probably mention real quick is, from a utility standpoint, is Gust of Wind, which, again, you're talking about a level 2 spell slot, but it's something that's going to have use later on because it can get rid of all kinds of obnoxious enemy spells like firewalls and cloud kills and things like that. So I always look for that.
Dancing balls too. You can actually
Yeah.
blow out dancing balls with that. It's a very, very awesome spell. A druid definitely should have that on their memorized spell list.
There was a short period of time when Chronoscope had just come out with the dragon, the Abishai at the end was always casting clouds in the green form, and people started farming. I think it was the higher level version of it, but people started farming the bracers out of Blockade Buster just for the clicky to gust to blow them out. What do you like for casting druids in here, Voodoo?
You know, I don't use it a lot, but I definitely memorize it, and it's one that I overlooked earlier on is Fire Trap. Um, yeah, I guess when I was, a younger DDO player, and I was playing like Sorks and Wizards, Fire Trap, I don't know, just didn't seem to fit my playstyle. I wanted to blast fireballs and stuff, but like with the way that I play my Druid, more close quarters casting, I drop a Fire Trap at my feet, along with Fire Seeds, which we can mention later, and it's awesome. It hits all the mobs that are around you, that are already in your AOE. So if you're looking to add it to a little bit more AOE DPS, you're not going to get a lot of DPS out of that, and it is abjuration, so you're probably not going to have a really good save. But I think it's worth using, and there's not a ton of second level spells to fill up your list with, so that's a nice one to add. Again, if you want to just add a little bit extra AOE DPS.
Yeah, there's Resist Energy, which is kind of an obvious buff spell that's really helpful.
Big time.
You can take Lesser Restoration. This is one of those spells that we've talked about in the past that I prefer to use potions for because it's more or less the same effect. Creeping Cold is in level 2, which I'm not sure. Are you a heavy user of Creeping and Greater Creeping Cold?
Oh yeah, I mean that's just that is a big part of the caster druid's power. I mean, I love these spells. I actually don't memorize the regular version of Creeping Cold though, at least out of single digit levels because you get that as an SLA.
Right.
And so I just use the SLA version and then focusing on using Greater Creeping Cold more if I'm trying to cast it, multiple times. But it's definitely a great spell, should be used. But like I said, you don't need to memorize the regular version. Just focus on your SLA for the regular Creeping Cold.
Yeah, there's also Align Fang, which is help if you're going to be in bear or wolf form. It just helps you bypass one type of an alignment-based damage reduction. Give you a little more flexibility on your spells. And see, Flame Blade is here. I've never really used it personally. It summons a scimitar, which can do which is kind of neat. You can even use it, I believe, as a monk and have it be a centered weapon for you, which is kind of a fun trick to play. It uses wisdom for attack and damage, which is kind of nice, but my wolf build is already kind of going more is focusing on strength just about as much as wisdom anyways, and the weapons you can get in the game are just so much better than a +1 flaming scimitar. So I've never really used it very much.
That's the thing. I hear it doesn't hear up, and I can't say that it doesn't hold up. I can't say I've used it personally, but that's what I'm hearing from other people. And another like caveat about it is every time you switch it out, like if you go to use a scroll or something, you got to recast it because it just disappears. So that makes it a major pain to use. So like this spell, I think really needs some work for it to be interesting. As it is, it's just not.
And with the loot where it is today, it doesn't, even when you get it, it can't hold a candle to the flame of all of the random loot stuff that you can get even at that level. It's just better. The last spell I want to pull out of this one is Pack Presence, which is going to be more useful if you are utilizing your summon and wolf pet and that kind of, and hirelings. You can do it in 2 different versions. It either increases or decreases threat generation by 75%. The reason I really want to pull this out is because it's actually kind of useful in Hound of Zoriat if you're running legendary or heroic. But if you're kind of doing end game legendary raiding, and a druid can be a really successful charmer on the dogs because these spells will apply, and you can kind of use that. I've actually gone back and forth on which one to use, and I think these days I tend to prefer the threat reduction as opposed to the increase, mostly because if they hit something else, I don't want that thing to fight them. I want it to fight me instead. And generally speaking, it's going to be easier to, you can have a tank kind of take damage, soak up some of the damage instead of having the dogs take it. It just kind of tends to work out a little better, and you don't really need. This spell doesn't really do a whole lot for you in this raid, to be honest, but it can provide just a little bit of a help with maintaining your aggro control wherever you want it. Particularly if you're using an Intim tank, a little bit easier for them. Level 3 for Druids.
I got one more I want to mention.
Go for it.
Just real quick. Splinter Bolt. It's not even one that I use, but I think it's worth a special mention because it does untyped damage. And Druids don't have a lot of spells that do untyped damage, so I just want to point out that you have that as an option.
Yeah, it's a good point. Very good point. Level 3. What do you guys like out of level 3?
I want to mention right away, one of the most overlooked crowd control spells in the game, Sleet Storm. Sleet Storm is so awesome. There is no save. Attackers are blinded. They're slipping around. They're slowed. But it is one of the most irritating spells in the game too. So the real nice thing about Druid is that Druids have freedom of movement on their spell list. They're the only class in the game to have both Sleet Storm and freedom of movement on their spell list. So hit yourself and your party members with freedom of movement and learn to love Sleet Storm. It works on Epic Elite mobs. Again, no save. It's great supplemental crowd control, and it's going to work in situations when nothing else does.
Yeah, it's a good mention. How do you feel about Call Lightning and Salt Ray?
Call Lightning's awesome. It's, the SLA. I have the regular version mem too when I want to double shot it. I mean, it's so powerful. In heroic levels, you can one shot almost, any regular mobs right through heroic, at least if you're getting a crit. Awesome spell. I've never really gotten into Salt Ray. Some people like to heighten it because of the stunning effect. I just never really got into it.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem with that one is it's a maximum of 5d6 damage, and I think Splinter Bolt, which we just talked about, it's lower level and it goes up to 12d6, so it's a little higher. It does do untyped damage, which is nice, but that's probably the only thing going for it.
I think it's Force, isn't it?
Force, yeah, sorry. So, I mean, which is slightly different than what you're normally going to be able to cast. You're generally going to be limited to elemental damage, but there's also in this level you can get Baiting Bite for wolf form or Shred for bear form. Again, I like taking these mostly because they're more powerful attacks. Baiting Bite is you're getting 4 weapon damage. Shred, you're getting 3 weapon damage, and they have some effects that go with them. I mean, I'll be honest. The wolf one is doing a bluff check, which I kind of ignore. I'm not a huge bluffer, but I know some people do, so it can be useful for those who, if you're going to invest in it. Shred, again, bear form is not very popular. It's essentially a Sunder effect that reduces AC, which is kind of completely useless because you're probably going to be able to be hitting them anyways, generally speaking. So, Necrobotanist is saying on Salt Ray that it's really about the stun. And it is Evocation DC, which is probably, if you're going to focus on a DC, I'm guessing for Druids, Evocation is probably going to be
that is like pretty much the only choice.
Yeah. Again, I don't know a caster version, So I don't focus on anything specifically, but that's where all your damage is going to be coming from. So the stun
And
can be nice.
And, yeah, and it's a fort save too, which is nice because, if you counter that with like a spike growth, which is a reflex save. I mean, you have a lot of reflex save spells at this point, so getting one that hits fort mobs is helpful as well.
Yeah. Let's see.
Do you guys ever use Quench, even just for the negative 20 penalty to the cold and electrical resistance before you're going to hit them with a Call Lightning or a cold spell like Creeping Cold?
I couldn't get into it. I tried too, because I know some people like it and use it against fire creatures and stuff. Like, I just couldn't get into it.
Yeah, that's respectable.
We gotta give a shout out. We haven't even mentioned, or glossing over them, is the vigor spells. I don't know if we were waiting until we got to regenerate or something, but it's worth mentioning. Like, if you've never played Druid, the vigor spells are amazing heal over time spells, and it's easy to overlook them because at first it doesn't seem like they're taken for a lot. But if you amp up your healing spell power, it's a nice way to just sort of hit yourself with a heal spell that you then don't have to think about for the next 8 seconds or 10 seconds or so, because you're going to be taking healing every couple of seconds. So if you're tanking a mob or you're taking a lot of damage, that's something that's going to help keep you up. Works a lot like Renewal if you've used that from Unyielding Sentinel.
Yeah, I was kind of going to focus on, we'll talk about healing kind of at the end as a wrap-up, and also the summon spells, which we've also kind of been glossing over. But we'll come back to hit those. But we will kind of, we'll talk about the philosophy of how you heal as a druid and whether or not we like summons at the end. We'll kind of mention some when you get some of those spells, though. And you're right, Vigor at level 3 is kind of when you start to get kind of into it. You have Lesser Vigor at level 1, which is, I mean, at level 1, it's okay. But it's not doing a whole lot for you.
Beats nothing.
It beats
Spider
nothing.
Skin is worth a mention, too. It's a nice buff.
Yeah, at lower levels particularly. How high does it get to? It's a little better than Bark Skin, right?
No, I think they're the same. You only get
okay.
a +5 out of it.
Yeah. All right, level 4, freedom of movement. I think we got to mention that one pretty much right out of the gate, which is
so important.
A great buff spell, particularly if you are going to be using Sleet Storm, unless you like griefing your party, in which case you only need it for yourself. I may or may not have done that in a permadeath group above a trap. No, I definitely did. I'm still waiting for comeuppance on that one.
Freedom of movement is one of the most important buffs in the game. In fact, it's so important that if I'm running a class that doesn't have it on their spell list, I'm using the boots, the Kundrak boots or the Orcish Privateer boots or the Boots of Blessed Travels, depending on the level, that has that. I mean, it's huge. And a lot of people don't realize, freedom of movement, in addition to making you immune to slippery surfaces, also prevents you from being held. So spells like Charm or Hold Monster and Mass Hold Monster, you're not going to be affected by it. It's giant. But if you have this on your spell list, it needs to be memmed and it needs to be part of your regular buffing routine.
Yes, I'm one of those people that's kind of terrible about there's a couple of spells like freedom movement and protection from evil that are buffs that I know are really, really helpful whenever you run into stuff, but I tend not to remember them until it hits me. I'm held. I'm going to die. I need freedom movement in this quest. I have that spell. I can cast it.
At the door. Part of your buff and at the start of a quest. Every time.
Again, not the best at that. I do want to mention, I've mentioned this in some of the other spell selection ones. Dispel Magic is on your spell list. Again, you can wand this, and first, I tend to find wands of this all over the place, but you can use them on spell wards to either get rid of them entirely or just kind of reduce their level so you can run through them. Put that freedom of movement on you before you try and run through a spell ward. It will help your survival. We get Flame Strike and Ice Storm, which are two good spells. Why don't you, Voodu? Why don't you kind of? You have a video, and we'll mention this later and reference it later. But you had a nice comparison between Ice Storm and Firewall. Do you want to address that now?
Sure.
Since Firewall is a level 5 spell, Ice Storm's level 4.
So I was talking about the merits of Ice Storm versus Firewall, and these are both awesome AoE DPS spells, and definitely both should be memorized. You should learn to love them both, but there's some important differences between them. But I'm a big Ice Storm guy now, but one of the really, really cool things about Ice Storm is there's no save whatsoever. Um, and I just learned that with Firewall, there's just a save on the first tick, and I appreciate the person who made a comment about that and made a note in this video that we're referring to. But Ice Storm also, in addition to doing cold damage, also does bludgeoning damage. So there's no save, is doing bludgeoning, which is untyped damage. So it's going to hit everything. Even mobs that are immune to cold, they're still going to take that bludgeoning damage. And it has a built-in slowing effect. And if you're a caster druid, you're running in water elemental form, and you run with Mantle the Icy Soul, which you should, if you're running in water elemental form, you should run with that all the time. Ice Storm is going to have an additional slowing effect. So it's great AoE DPS, it's supplemental crowd control, and it's going to hit everything, even evasion mobs, no save.
Like, you can also pair it really nicely with in Shirati, there's the low level Stay Frosty, I think is the stance, that has a chance to add a slow movement effect on them as well. On your spells, which can be pretty handy. Let's see, do you use Flame Strike?
It's too slow. I do have it memmed, and I do toss it like if I'm just trying to spam, if I'm just trying to blow through my SP bar, but I don't use it a bunch. So it just, you cast it, and it comes down from the sky, and it just seems like takes like 4 or 5 seconds to come down and hit, and the mobs have moved out of the way by the time it hits. So I'm not a big fan of Flame Strike, but one of the neat things about it, for Druid particularly, is that half the damage is fire, and half the damage is, I think, good. So, yeah. Druids are mostly elemental damage types, so this is one of the few spells that they have that does a different damage type. So that's worthy of making special note of that for Druid.
On the melee Druid side of things, Enveloping Swarm is at this level, which, I don't know, I've kind of gone back and forth on. I use it. I don't know that it does a whole lot of damage. It's 3 untyped damage every 2 seconds for a while. I don't think it's doing a ton of damage, but it's doing a little damage. So I tend to put it on. And let's see. If you're in bear form, Rising Fury is nice because every time something hits you, you get +2 to Strength and Constitution, and it can stack up to 5 times. We're talking about a +10 Strength and Constitution bonus. It's morale bonus. There are some other places where you can get that, but if you're going for a bear form, I definitely say to get that spell. On the wolf side, they get a spell that's kind of a little different. It's not going to benefit you so much. It's Harrowing Pack, which gives all of your hireling pets, summon creatures, charm creatures, yada yada yada, +2 enhancement bonus to flanking attacks, and gives them a knockdown effect when they roll a 20 on attack rolls. So that can be helpful. I wouldn't say it's anywhere near as good as Rising Fury if you're a bear. But again, and you can use this on the puppies in How to Ride as well. Although I don't think it's really, again, this is probably not giving you as much help as you could from some other places, but it's there. Level 5, Greater Vigor, which is nice. It's better vigor. And the thing with Vigor spells too is that, if you cast Greater Vigor, it ticks for a while at Greater Vigor, and then it goes down to normal Vigor for a little while, and then it goes down to Lesser Vigor for a little while. So you get some healing for quite a while on it. You get Panacea at this level, which is a nice get rid of some nasty stuff on you spell. Cures just about everything. There's a little bit of healing too, but Panacea is all about getting rid of stuff that's on you. You're not really using it for healing. Wall of Fire, which we kind of talked about. Anything else you wanted to say on Wall of Fire?
Double damage or extra damage at least to undead. So that's, if you didn't know that, that's definitely worth making a mental note that if you're fighting a lot of undead, Wall of Fire can be your go-to AoE DPS in preference to Ice Storm.
We didn't talk about it in our previous shows on the spell selection, but something you brought up in your video that I think is worth mentioning Wall of Fire. Learn how to cast Wall of Fire because it has a directionality to it based on how you are facing. Not how you are relating to the mob, but which direction you are facing will determine which direction the Wall of Fire is actually cast at, which can have an effect on what you're hitting with it.
Yeah, it is a neat little targeting mechanism that's worth learning how to use.
Yep. Do you use Call Lightning Storm?
You know, when this first came out, I was like, I'm going to be running with this on all the time. It sounds so cool because, you know, it goes for like a minute and it casts just a random lightning bolt every few seconds. But it just really, it just seems like it does so little damage and just isn't even worth the effort. I don't even bother with it anymore.
I will say that the cookie version of it you can get during the festival is great for low-level characters. Which is about the only time I've ever used it.
Yeah.
But I've used that to some decent effect at low levels. Death Ward, great buff spell. One of those ones that I should cast a lot more often.
Right at the door, along with freedom of movement.
Yep.
Don't even step foot into further on into the quest without casting Death Ward and freedom of movement on you.
Yes, indeed. On the melee side of things, you get Animal Growth, which is a +4 size bonus to Strength and Constitution, which, again, is a little better than Ram's Might. They don't stack, they're both size bonuses. It's a pretty short duration, but +4 to Strength and Constitution is great. You get a -2 to Dexterity. I'll be honest, my Druid is not a reflex guy, so -2 to Dexterity is not a problem. And just kind of ignore it.
You can cast that on your wolf, too.
Yes, you can. You cannot cast it on the Zoriat hounds, though. I was disappointed by that. I tried that one. You can, however, use Pack Aptitude.
Yes, this one's huge.
Which gives you +2, or you can get up to +6 to an ability score. You have to pick which ability score. Hint: pick Strength, damage.
Yes.
Duh. But +6, it's +3 to damage on every hit. For whatever you're casting on, so that can be really helpful.
Giant buff. If you're doing the charming and you're a druid and Hound of Zoriat, use the strength version of Pack Aptitude, but just really want to emphasize that this only works if you're the one doing the charming. If someone else is doing the charming, Pack Aptitude does not work. I think I learned that from you, Patrick.
Maybe. It's not outside the realm. I retooled my druid to kind of be more of a charmer than anything else. Do you know what the bonus is, though? It doesn't. The description on the wiki doesn't actually say it. It just says +2 bonus.
Oh, the type of bonus you mean?
Yeah.
Seems to stack with everything. I don't remember.
Yeah. I think it's stacked. It's probably untyped. There's also Cold Breath for Winter Wolf form. Which is essentially a little clone of cold.
Yep.
I kind of stopped using it, I'll be honest. Now, part of that, I think, is because of spell slots. And I think when I picked up Pack Aptitude, Cold Breath is what fell off my list. But to be honest, I wasn't using it as much anyways, mostly because as a melee, I'm not really investing heavily into my casting skills, particularly like damage and saves. They're not bad, but it's not something I'm investing in as heavily as I am melee. So I would rather use a different click attack, and I don't have a lack of click attacks on my druid. So I didn't really have the quick hotbar space access to it, and I just wasn't using it. So I swapped it out. One thing I do like, Reincarnate, which is perhaps the most fun way to raise your party members.
Hell yeah.
Because not only does it bring them back to life, but it brings them back to life as a random race, which will bring with it a positive and negatives to stat scores according to whatever race they are. Which can be really hilarious if you, say, raise someone who's got, like, a standing 11 in, say, intelligence and likes to use Silver Flame potions and has that 11 just specifically so that they could use Silver Flame potions, but now they have a -2 and they can't. That was
If only there
entertaining.
was a visual component to this, this would be like the most fun spell in the game.
Yeah, right. It would be kind of funny if there was something to that. The one thing I'll say we definitely should mention about it in a very serious manner about Reincarnate is it's very slow to cast.
Mm-hmm.
So particularly if you're used to the timing of Raise Dead and Resurrection and someone running to you before they snap, it's a much tighter window with Reincarnate. It's the long casting time for that spell, which is a bit unfortunate.
Yeah, I mostly scroll Resurrection on my Druid, but I definitely memorize Reincarnate as well.
Yeah, depending on who you're running with, particularly some of the guys that Ash and I run with, if someone's got to Reincarnate, there is a definite desire to bring you back as a kobold.
Mm-hmm.
So, level 6?
One other spell
Go for it.
I just want to mention, Stone Skin is a great buff if you don't have any other form of damage reduction, especially in lower levels, especially for newbies that tend to be a little more squishy. Great buff.
Yeah. All right. Should we move on to level 6 then?
Show.
I guess I should mention, Necrobot was commenting, particularly in Legendary Elite or Epic Elite, in our chat room, and just like you said, he ends up scrolling Resurrection as opposed to actually casting Reincarnate a lot because it's so slow.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a good point indeed. All right, level 6. Greater Dispel Magic. Again, the same idea was Dispel Magic. You can grab scrolls of this, use it on spell words. We've mentioned that a few times. Let's see, what else we got here? Frostbite for wolves, which adds... it essentially adds Frostburst to your weapon, which can be or your jaws, as it were, which can be kind of nice. You also get Tenacious Pack, which now we're starting to get into a little bit better ones than that are more useful in situations like Count as Royat. It gives you 30 and gives your friends 30 a plus 30 enhancement bonus to fortification and plus 60 positive healing amplification, which can be kind of nice for those situations. Sadly, you can't use it on your party members, just your specific friends that you have charmed and controlled. There's also Tremor, which is a bear attack, which is okay. It doesn't really do anything other than try and knock things down. Which is a little bit of a bummer. It doesn't have any plus to damage or anything like that. And the last one I'll mention is Fire Shield, which is, again, a really nice spell. Nice to have it on your spell list. You can scroll it if you wish, but I usually I take the spell because casting scrolls as a wolf is kind of difficult.
Yes. Fire Shield's huge. I mean, if you're a druid, if you have this on your spell list for any class, you need to have this memmed. It's a giant, absorbs 50% of fire or cold damage. Just giant to have situationally. If you don't have it on your class list, even if you're not a caster, you should have scrolls. I was just having this conversation with somebody in game the other day. It's such, again, situational, but so highly useful that it's definitely going out and buying 100 stack of scrolls.
Yep. What else do you like out of here?
Well, I mentioned Fire Seeds earlier when I was talking about Fire Trap, the second level spell, and so if I'm using one, I tend to use both of them. The Fire Seeds has two different versions. You can throw them and it shoots 3 missiles, or you can drop it at your feet. And I tend to use the drop it at your feet because, again, I like to do the close quarters casting where I'm throwing up a bunch of AoEs and dragging mobs into it and fighting them all in the middle of that. So I drop the Fire Trap, drop the Fire Seeds trap version in front of me, and then it blows up right there and hits everybody around me. So, and it's conjuration. So earlier I said that evocation is like the only thing, that's like the big school for druids. But if there's a secondary school, conjuration is the next most important. So it definitely pales in comparison to evocation for druid, but you do have a handful of conjuration spells, and this is one of them. What else do we have here? Greater Creeping Cold. This spell is giant. This spell is so awesome. And prior to maybe like Arcane Pulse, I might have said that it was the best. Well, I have said that it was the best dot in the game. But, you know, Arcane Pulse, I think, probably is now. But what's great about Creeping Cold is that, like, with traditional caster dots, they have long cooldown. You know, this only has, like, a 2-second cooldown, so you can just, you know, pretty much almost rapid fire it on different mobs. And a lot of times it's a fire and forget spell. Like, you're going to cast that on a mob, and, you know, 6 to 8 seconds later, they're going to be dead. Like, you don't even have to worry about that. Not so much like if you're doing epic elites, but I mean a little bit earlier in levels. Such a high power spell. I love it. And you cast that with Creeping Cold, and you can toss your cold spray on them too, which we'll get to that one later to do even more damage. Huge, huge spell. Make sure you have this one.
Where did he go to level 7?
Word of Balance is a level 6.
Oh, you like Word of Balance?
Yes, I actually have the SLA and the regular version. Worth a special mention too for Druid, because this is one of the spells that they have that isn't elemental damage type, so it's nice to have that option. This is one of only, well, really only one, like 2 or 3 spells that have a spell resistance check. I do want to emphasize that on Druid, it is not at all in any way, shape, or form worthwhile to invest in spell penetration, but I just want to mention it. This does have a spell pen check to it. You know, don't amp that up to try to overcome it. If it hits, great. If it doesn't, that's fine. But it's definitely, especially the SLA, it's worth cycling into your regular attack pattern.
Yeah. Level 7, and this is where I think it gets a little bit more interesting, because there's actually a lot of really good spells on this list.
It's a tasty level.
Yeah, it's a really good level. Right out of the gate, Greater Mass Vigor is at level 7. Regenerates at level 7. Those are probably the two that I kind of tend to use the most in terms of healing a party. True Seeing is on this list, which is really helpful. Jaws of Winter, which is a wolf attack, which is 6 weapon damage, and you can freeze your foe solid, which is really fun. Relentless Onslaught for Dire Bears. You get a melee attack that's 5 weapon damage and knocks your targets down. So you can really get some bang on it, and it helps keep stuff down. So that can be really nice as well. You kind of mentioned Freezing Spray, which is great and gives vulnerability to cold. There was a spell we were talking about earlier about giving vulnerability, not Quench. I would say you'd probably get better bang for your buck out of using Freezing Spray than Quench.
25% extra damage from cold. I mean, it's giant. Yeah. So you definitely need to hit bosses with this. But I sometimes will even hit non-bosses with it.
And it's a spray, right? It hits everything in a cone.
I don't
or is it
think
a specific
so.
one?
It just does target a single target.
It's not a spell that I use because I'm not doing a lot of cold damage, and I'm already tied on spells just as a wolf form in this as well. Let's see, what else do you have here?
I do want to mention, you mentioned Regenerate, but a lot of people don't realize that that removes negative levels, so that's a huge component of it, in addition to eliminating some other effects as well. So, awesome healing spell. Creeping Doom. This is one that I overlooked for like a couple years, because when Druids first came out, I cast it, and it's just like, Produce Flame. It's so ridiculously slow that you're just like, this is a joke, I'm not even gonna. So I just tossed it out the window early on, and then later on when I made my build post a couple years ago, somebody's like, why aren't you talking about Creeping Cold? And I was like, well, I don't know, I'll take another look at it. And I love this spell. And it's so easy to overlook, again, because it's embarrassingly slow. This is an AoE dot, okay? And so it hits a mob, and then it splashes to everything around it, and it takes damage for them every 2 seconds for 10 seconds or whatever. So it's poison damage, so there's quite a few mobs that are immune to that, but nonetheless, this is a really, really cool spell. And I like to use it for my close quarters combat style, casting style, because I could just hit the mob right in front of me, and then it splashes to every mob around it. So if you overlooked Creeping Doom, give it another look. It's a really cool spell.
Yeah, there's. How do you feel about elemental toughness?
Oh, it's a giant. If you don't have another source of damage reduction, this is a must. This needs to be on your buff bar.
All right. The other ones I look at in this list, Body of the Sun and Firestorm.
Body of the Sun is like one of the most fun spells in the game.
Except you got to be a fire elemental.
Yes, so like in heroic level, and even though I'm a cold druid in heroic levels, I'm doing fire elemental form first at level 13. Body of the Sun, it makes you a walking firewall. It's so cool. It's a buff, so it can be extended. So if you extend it, it lasts a minute, and just like I said, it turns you into a walking firewall. You got this big globe of fire around you that just damages everything. You're just walking through like anything that takes fire damage just melts around you. It is so cool. It's so much fun. If you've never played a druid, you gotta try Body of the Sun. I love it. But there are fire druids that in epic levels, one of the nice things about Body of the Sun is that it procs Empyrean magic, so it keeps that charged up all the time. Um, it's a beautiful spell.
Do you use Firestorm or Sunbeam very much?
I don't use Firestorm. I don't have room for it on my spell list, and like Flame Strike, it just sort of seems really slow to hit. So I don't
I
not
can
really
understand
impressed
that.
with the damage either.
What about Sunbeam?
Yeah, I definitely have that. That's a real nice one to use against like powerful undead, like the Abbot, for example.
Yeah, I have Sunbolt on my favorite soul, which I really enjoy having, and I think it's more or less the same. Uh, Level 8, which is again a pretty fun level for druids. What do you like out of here?
Dan's being so quiet. I feel like my druid zealousness is making him quiet.
Oh, that's okay. Go ahead.
You
I
first.
mostly play wolf form druid, so the other stuff is not really my thing. Although, looking at this list, the sunburst and the earthquake are the two that I look at here. I really like the earthquake especially. I have played a caster druid and I love that spell. Can't get enough of it.
It's one of the best crowd control spells in the game.
That's the one spell I wish I could cast better as a wolf. That's Earthquake.
Yeah.
Although, if I recall correctly, when we asked what the best spell in the game was, Voodoo Spice did not say Earthquake in Guild Feud.
I don't remember what I said, but yeah,
I think Earthquake got left unsaid.
I don't remember.
Implosion's still my favorite spell in the whole game, but earthquake is up there.
There's a couple of things about Earthquake too that you don't need a giant save for it to be very effective. In fact, I've long been an advocate of don't try for the no-fail saves. I mean, I just feel like that's spending resources that could be spent elsewhere. That's a personal choice, though. But the bottom line is that you don't need to have like this enormous, amazing DC for Earthquake to be very effective. And it ticks every couple of seconds, so you can throw multiple Earthquakes down, so you get multiple chances to drop them. It does a little bit of damage, but it isn't worth maximizing in power because it just makes it cost prohibitive in my opinion. Turn off maximize in power. You want to turn on quicken, turn on heighten if you have it, but don't try to boost that damage because it's just not worth it. That's a good way to conserve a little spell points is by turning off those extra metas, those damage metas.
One thing about Earthquake that I think gets lost in the shuffle that even I didn't really realize until I started doing some research here is enemies within the area effect have an additional 30% spell failure chance. And when you look at the reflex save stuff, it saves for half damage and negating the knockdown, but it doesn't seem to actually do anything about the spell failure chance. So that's something to think about as well.
There's a quirky use to this, and probably not WAI, but it's not an exploit, so I feel okay mentioning it. I mean, if you play DDO, you're going to get in situations where like there's a freaking mob stuck in a wall or behind a gate for some reason or whatever. Like you can throw Earthquake down and it will like hit mobs like in the wall or on the other side of a gate and stuff. So that's kind of a neat, quirky use for it to be aware of.
Nice. What else do you like out of here?
Fires of Purity is a nice weapon buff if you don't have an Artie in the party. People really appreciate that, but don't cast it on people if they have Celestia. It will break the natural damage reduction of Celestia, and it will just piss them off. So, you might want to ask them if they're using. But, that's just like it's a courteous thing. Like you don't want a courtesy thing. You don't want to cast it on yourself as a caster druid, but some others might really like that. I also really like Sunburst. I do take the regular version in addition to the SLA. Double shot them. The blinding effect is huge, so that's more crowd control. It also does some nice light damage. But as a personal preference, I actually turn off the damaging metas for the regular version. Obviously, for the SLA, it's free to apply all your metas. But just to conserve spell points, I like to turn off maximize it in power for the regular version of Sunburst.
It doesn't really do a whole lot of damage base-wise anyways, so you're not getting a lot of bang for your buck with the maximize.
For most, right, situationally, like certain undeads might take more. I also want to mention Ice Flowers here. I actually don't even use it, but I know there are some big fans of it, and it does deserve special mention because, again, this is another spell that druids have that does untyped damage. So you don't have a lot of non-elemental damage types. This is one of them. It does half cold damage and half piercing damage, and it has a really short cooldown of like 1 or 2 seconds, so you can cast it really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, what I want to mention is Finger of Death. Do not use this on a caster druid. This is a trap. This is just put there to make you drool. Because like we see Finger of Death, you're a caster, you're like, oh, I gotta have Finger of Death. It's so cool. And Finger of Death's a great spell, but not on a druid. And here's why: it's necromancy. You don't want to waste resources bumping up your necromancy on a druid. It's got a spell pen check. You don't want to waste your resources bumping up your spell penetration on a druid. Ignore Finger of Death. Pretend it is not there on druid. Okay, I know some people are like, oh, you could be effective in heroics. Fine. If you want to use it in heroics, fine. I would say don't even bother though, because it's not going to work in epics. So don't even get in the habit of using it on a druid, because you're going to have to bail on it later anyways. Focus on using your other spells like Call Lightning and Creeping Cold and Greater Creeping Cold in heroics anyways. So just ignore it. Pretend it's not there.
There you go. We should talk about heal, which you get at this level, which is quite a bit later than a cleric or favorite soul would get it, but it is nice to have once you do get it. So, and the fun thing about heal, even though you get it later, I'm trying to remember how if the scrolls for a druid, if you have to be a later level or not. But
I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I don't think you do either, but it's kind of weird. Some places, some spells that classes get on their spell list, they can use when another class would get it, which might be earlier, and other times it's not the case. But you do get heal, which is a great spell for healing. It pretty much lives at number 1 on my hotbar, even though I'm a wolf. Granted, my wolf is supposed to, like, one of his secondary features is he's supposed to be a healer. So, I also have found that on my druid, more than the rest of my kind of quote healing classes or healing characters, tends to carry and use heal scrolls a lot more, and that has more to do with the fact that his spell points are not as high as some other classes because he's multi-classed. So he's got some other. He doesn't have as much spell points as a lot of my other casting classes. I do not take Howl of Terror on my wolf.
Neither do I.
So the Unstoppable one is not too bad though. But it does prevent healing, which is for 15 seconds, which is not great. So I don't. Not that I play it very much, but when I was playing around with it, I didn't really use that either. Level 9.
Well, it's worth mentioning heal too. That it damages undead. Don't forget about that, because druids, like all the vigor spells, they don't damage undead, but heal, and you also get the cure spells. Some of them that does damage undead. So situationally, heal obviously also gets rid of a lot of conditions too. So awesome spell.
I find that to be more annoying than anything else.
Yeah. There's something to be said about regeneration not actually hitting, because I can have an undead targeted and cast regeneration on myself and get benefit from it, not waste the spell on someone else. But level 9 spells. There's not a lot of them, but regenerate mass is great. Use it, regenerate for a lot of people, which is fantastic.
Awesome.
I love Snowslide. It's essentially abundant step, but as you go through enemies, you attack them with some extra damage, and they can get frozen solid, which is great. And you can go through them, which is fantastic and very helpful. And again, you can use it's got utility uses where you can jump across chasms, stuff like that.
It's also like, because you said you can move through mobs with this, if you ever get stuck, this is a great way to bust through mobs.
Yep. I have used it as a get out of jail free card on numerous occasions. I used to have Storm of Vengeance, but I took another level in a cross class, so I lost it, which is unfortunate because I did like that spell. It does acid and electrical damage in an AoE for a while, which is great.
I used to have Storm of Vengeance. I still do, but I used to. This is an awesome spell. One of the great things about it is that there is no save for the acid damage, and that's the main part of the damage. It also does every 4 seconds a random enemy gets hit by a lightning bolt, but that's it's the acid damage is just the primary damage mode of this, and again, no save. It's huge. This is a very, very important spell. So there comes an SLA version. I have both the SLA and the regular version because it's on long cooldown, so this helps us sort of mitigate that long cooldown. Great spell. Also does not extinguish Firewall. Like Ice Storm obviously puts out a Firewall. Storm of Vengeance does not.
This is worth mentioning with these spells that do kind of these damage over time things. If you cast them on something that would normally be shielded, but while the shield is down, when the shield goes back up, it still ticks them. Which is kind of a neat. So if you're in Fire and Thunder Peaks or a Phylactery or any number of places where something becomes immune to damage for whatever mechanic reason, if you hit them with Storm of Vengeance before they become invulnerable, it still does damage after they do.
It's acid damage too,
yeah.
Which you don't. That's a different damage type, so this can hit mobs that maybe are immune to your other damage types.
Mantle of the Icy Soul and Anger of the Noonday Sun.
I mean, Mantle of the Icy Soul needs to be on you 100% of the time if you're in water elemental form. This buff is so giant. I mean,
cast it before you cast Freedom of Movement on yourself.
Why does that make a difference?
It's more important than freedom of movement.
They're both huge. I mean, come on, you can't even. You got to do them both. So targeted your cold spells take 25% penalty to movement speed, giant. A 10% penalty to attack speed, giant. A -4 penalty to reflex and fortitude saves. I mean, this is amazing. Do
those penalties work on bosses?
I don't think they're supposed. No. Actually, it seems like they might sometimes. I don't know. I think maybe it did at one time and it didn't, and it did again. But so Ice Storm, Creeping Cold, Ice Flowers if you use it. So they're all going to be slowed down, penalty to save. So this is basically like boosting. Like if you throw an Ice Storm and an Earthquake, this is functionally, reducing. It's reducing their saves by 4 against that Earthquake. So it's like bumping up your Earthquake DC by 4. It's huge. It's also okay, and then so you cast that on yourself in water elemental form, and then Anger of the Noonday Sun is like the stupid cousin of Mantle of Icy Soul that you cast on yourself in fire elemental form. Now I have a theory about these two. I think that the programmer was given like some little post-it notes about like this is what should be on Anger of the Noonday Sun and this is what should be on Mantle of Icy Soul, and he spilled his coffee on them and he was like, oh, now I don't know what's supposed to be on which one, and he accidentally like gave almost all the benefits to Mantle of Icy Soul, because Anger of the Noonday Sun is so unbelievably stupid compared to Mantle of Icy Soul. Like it stands to reason that it should be sort of like an equivalent counterpart for fire elemental, but it's just so weak that don't even bother with it. If -5 penalty to fire resistance, a 2% fortification penalty against targeting your fire spells, waste of time. Come on.
Fair enough.
I mean, I always thought like maybe there was going to be a hidden component that would come out, but no, it's just awful. It's laughable. And so, like I said, I really feel like maybe one of those penalties, like maybe the -4 penalty or reflex and fortitude saves, maybe that was supposed to be part of Anger of the Noonday Sun, and somehow it got, like, seriously, like I really feel that way, and like it got put on the Mantle Icy Soul by accident. Who knows? It's just my conspiracy theory.
Maybe.
But
All right, let's wrap up with Druids with a couple of things. First off, Necrobotanist in our chat asked, do you try to max out 1 or 2 spell powers, or do you focus more on universal spell power?
I mean, I try to max out cold, but I definitely like to have like as high as potency item as possible to cover the rest of the bases. So like Pansophic Circlet, that's the perfect item for a caster druid.
And let's see, other things we want to talk about. Summon Nature's Ally, which you get for free. I don't use it very much. I only use it if I need some a distraction, personally. What's your thoughts on? Do you have any of the summons that you like to use?
I don't use them. You know, I'm really hoping for when they finally come out with the Druid Pass that, you know, they add more augmenting summoning ability to the Druid's tree, and then at that point I'm going to try to make a summoner, but right now, I mean, summons can be made really powerful. I'm just saying I don't use them, and I'm waiting for that day that they do a little bit more.
That's fair. And let's see. The other thing we want to talk about is healing on a druid. And you can make the thing I'll say that is you can make a really great healer druid. The one thing about it though is you're going to be using regenerate and vigor a lot, which you have to get into a different mindset than when you're playing a cleric, because you need to be proactively healing as opposed to reactively healing. So you kind of have to, particularly if you get into really high endgame rating, your healing needs to be ahead of the damage that's being taken, as opposed to reacting to the damage that people are taking. Do you have any thoughts on healing, you guys?
I think the spells have some unique uses. You know, for example, if you're about to run through a trap or something like that, you know, if you can, like you said, if you can proactively anticipate the damage, then the fact that you can cast a spell and then not have to worry about it as you're doing something, you know, or as you're fighting, can be really beneficial. So you just have to, like you said, think about it differently. But there's so much value there.
All right, should we move on to Ranger real quick, now that we've talked about Druids for extended periods of time? So we'll start with level 1 Ranger spells, which you get at, like level 4? Something like that. It's much later. But you do get Resist Energy at level 1, and you get Jump at level 1, which are both great, and Ram's Might, which... It's important to note with Ram's Might for Rangers because they will get animal growth, but you can't cast that on yourself because you're not an animal. Ram's Might works on a Ranger, on your Ranger itself. Do you like anything else out here, Ash?
You know, not really. The Long Strider at very early levels, you know, but then it's quickly bypassed by gear and such. Entangle is nice maybe for the first couple levels too, but typically not. There's enough buff spells here that I'll just use those.
Yeah, keep in mind if you're looking at your spell list for Ranger, Magic Fang does not work on you because you're not using natural weapons. I mean, you can cast it on yourself, but if you're not using natural weapons, it's not going to do anything for you. Level 2? What do you like out of level 2? Anything?
You know, not much, really. You know, protection from energy, I guess. Again, if you're about to go through a trap, it can be nice to have a little of that. You know, Cure Light Wounds maybe when you first get it, but it's quickly bypassed by better spells. And Bark Skin's nice, but there's so many sources for natural armor bonuses nowadays. It's hard to really get excited about that beyond the first, you know, handful of levels or so.
Yep. Should we move on to level 3?
Sure, why not?
All right. What do you like out of level 3?
You know, there's some utility here in terms of, you know, the remove disease, neutralize poison, and the cure moderate runes. Again, I've never been a big summoner, so I tend to ignore that. There's just not a ton of spells here. I think people have called for Ranger spells to be revisited, and I can see why. You know, even comparing them to Paladin spells, they're They're a little light in terms of volume and such.
Versatility, yeah. The one thing at a level 3 I'll mention is Wild Instincts, which Ranger Rogue splashes are pretty popular. Maybe not as much as they used to be, but they were pretty popular for a while. And until recently, I mean, plus 10 insight bonus to spot was pretty hard to come by. So
That's huge.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Level 4, freedom of movement.
Did I mention how important freedom of movement is? I may have forgotten to mention that when we were talking about Druid spells.
It used to be, back in the day, a ranger with freedom of movement was the primary person responsible for it at the beginning of a raid to save the mana for the clerics.
Yeah, good point.
Was definitely a way to go. Cure Sheriff's Wounds is also in here, which, I'll be honest, I pretty much take every healing spell I can take on a ranger. Not so much from the standpoint that he needs that much healing. I mean, it helps for sure, but just, there's not much to take as a ranger. And I think you're spot on with it's, there's not a lot here to cast on you when you compare it to like a paladin, which has essentially the same spell progression. I mean, they're talking about having Holy Sword and
Resurrection.
Yeah, they get the raise spells. They also get
Zeal.
That's the one I was trying to think of. And Rangers get like none of that. I don't know.
Yeah, they get Ram's Might. Ram's Mights are only really helpful offensive spell.
And freedom of movement. I mean, those are like, and jump. Those are like, and resist energy too. I mean, but it's like in a major contrast to every other class we've talked about, there are more level 1 spells that I use on my ranger than any other level.
Yeah.
So. I think that about wraps up. Anything else you guys want to say about Rangers before we move into game news and such?
Yeah. They're a lot of fun to play despite their poor spell list.
It's true. There is a lot of fun to be had on Rangers. All right, then. We will move into game news for 2 weeks worth of game news. We have another screenshot of the week. Arcercaix brings in the cold in the 278 screenshot of the week. Nice shot of the dragon mid-cold breath. Very well done. Let's see. Game news. Sev dropped a little bit of a fun one. And he kind of snuck it in there, and then everyone caught it pretty quick and made it a bigger thing so people didn't miss it. But he said that they are planning out the future of DDO in years. This was in response to the layoffs. They're planning out the future for DDO in years and discussing the possibility of an expansion near the end of 2017. Cool things are coming.
Oh my god, I was so excited when I saw that.
I think I don't even care about the expansion thing. It's just, it's reassuring, particularly coming from we had more layoffs, which I personally wasn't overly concerned about because I know that happens a lot, and I think it was probably targeted more to other areas of the company because they were focusing on a transition to more mobile gaming. But I mean, that's a year and a half away that they're talking about planning for a game. Now, a lot of things can change, and the sky can come crashing down, and a lot of things can happen in just the world in general in a year and a half. But the fact that they're planning that far in advance, I think, is very reassuring. And expansion probably means that actually it's kind of funny. This is a response to people being concerned about layoffs. An expansion means we'd probably get more content in an update because it'd be an expansion, so they need to have development stuff to get people to buy the expansion. It probably actually also means that there would be layoffs afterwards because they'd hire a few extra people, and then lay them off. But
Probably.
I mean, that actually happened with Menace the Underdark, if for those who aren't aware. Other game news. This is important. Please pay attention if this is you. Mailboxes. I'll just read what Jerry wrote. As you may know, we recently implemented a system in DDO that limits your mailbox inbox to 50 mails. As an aside, I'll say that actually technically already existed. It just wasn't working right for certain ways that people were getting around it. Anyways, this was done to start addressing an issue where exceptionally large inboxes were causing lag due to character data bloat. When we implemented this system, we asked everyone to voluntarily reduce their inboxes, and the system itself began preventing people from sending mail or posting things on the auction house if they had more than 50 mails, which is, again, actually how it was supposed to work in the first place. We appreciate everyone's efforts to address this issue. Remember that we won't see a lag reduction until players have smaller mailbox inboxes, so it's been up to you to improve things by reducing your inbox. We're now at the stage when we need to take the next step. We have a command that allows us to prune inboxes down to 50 mails, and we will soon be running that command, starting with the characters that have the largest inboxes. They have a couple of people that are literally in the thousands.
Wow.
Militia has counseling, as does Fred, if you have hoarder syndrome.
Remember we talked about last time I was on here, we're
Yeah,
going to do therapy for hoarders.
This is the last call. Please get your inbox down to 50 mails if you're above this limit and are concerned about losing anything in your inbox. I will say it again as an aside, don't plan on this, but as an aside, I'm pretty sure that if you had something in your mailbox that got deleted and you contacted customer service, they might give it back to you if it was like something specific and they could find it. But don't plan on that. Get rid of the stuff in your mailbox. And what's funny is that he then posted, as of Wednesday on July 20th, here's the player count of folks with more than 50 mail pieces in their inbox. And it came out to about 1,900 people. So that's a lot of folks. Some of which may not be playing the game, which they understand. But they know that some of those include active players. So they're asking you to please voluntarily reduce your size before they involuntarily do it for you. So something to keep in mind. Kenneth crafting. Some more information on Kenneth crafting. Let's see, where do we want to start? So they consolidated some of the stuff and also gave some new information. Kenneth crafting recipe experience. The 50% success mark will now be 15 levels below the recipe as opposed to 10 levels as it is currently. To go along with that, players will now be able to craft recipes they have at least 1% chance of success instead of being limited to 50% and above. I'm not a huge crafter. I'm not sure why you would want to try and craft something at 1%. It's cool that they're giving you the option, but it seems kind of silly.
Yeah, if you want to roll a dice, it's fine. But I think it is better because if something's just at 45 or 40% and you can get one of those really easy boosters that give you a 25% boost rate, then you might want to do it. You also get more XP every time you craft if you're crafting at a lower level. So in terms of min-maxing your crafting XP, you kind of want to roll the dice in order to do that. So this should help with that.
Let's see, trinkets. The current plan for trinkets is to allow any of the non-damage scaling effects to take the place of the prefix and suffix, and any of the non-damaging insightful scaling effects can go into the extra slot. It is still being decided on what special non-scaling effects will go on trinkets and where. Rune arms, they don't have further information at this time addressing that because he knows there will be questions. Information will be provided as they get further to the direction on that point. It's mainly a matter of deciding how to adjust the rune arms to work with the new system and which effects they will get to craft. I'll be honest, I never really crafted on my rune arms as they are right now. Which I probably should have. Let's see. Artificers and Mark of Making bonuses will still apply as they currently do, and players are still restricted to the level cap. So these abilities will not push a character above the 400 level mark. Which I thought was interesting, because you can craft something that's going to be like 425. I was a little surprised that they're going to hard cap those bonuses at the maximum XP bonus anyways.
Yeah, me too.
Other things, not directly related to Kenneth, but do affect Kenneth. DR breakers. Chai, if you're listening, this one's for you. They're looking into adding DR breakable or breaking into good, evil, etc. That would be a retroactive change that would most likely take effect on existing items as well as items going forward. Same would apply to effects from Kenneth crafting. When that is added back in, the negative level for using alignment-based DR breakers you don't match will also be added back in, as it should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Attributes. There's been talk about attributes being too low at lower levels. That is a scale they can look at and tinker with, which would also change items that exist with the scaling effects and would change what came out of Cannon's crafting as well. Which is he mentioned that a few times, which is one of the main reasons why they changed how random loot was created and going to scaling effects so that they can change them retroactively a lot easier. So, Voodu, anything you want to say on the updates for Cannon's crafting?
You know, I have a lot of feelings about it, but it's just not worth broaching. I'm just taking a wait and see approach. You know, like I am on the players' council, so I've been vocal at the start about some of my concerns. There was some pushback, so I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna wait and see, give it a chance. And like I've told you before, like I'm gonna plow into this. Like as soon as that comes out, I will be living in the crafting hall.
I've actually been thinking that I need to go live in the crafting hall now and use a lot of the recipes that are going to go away, because I'm just kind of assuming that when the new stuff comes live, the more you craft the same recipe, the less XP you'll get from it. So there's a whole bunch of crafting recipes that I haven't touched that I could get maximum XP for now.
Yeah, you can still XP now, folks. Like the XP is your levels are going to translate into the new system. So, you know, at this point, it's probably not worth the effort trying to learn the current system if you don't already know it, because there is kind of a steeper learning curve, and hopefully that's one of the huge changes in the new system, that it's a lot easier to use. But you know, if you already, you know, or at least are somewhat familiar with it, it's worth still grinding out some XP right now, because like I said, your levels will be retained.
I will say, as someone who never got into crafting because I wasn't really interested in taking the time and for the benefit that I could get, I'm actually kind of excited and will probably use this crafting system. Like, I'm looking forward to crafting some stuff. So I'm nowhere near the level to actually do any of that. So I've got a grind coming up, but it's there. Let's see. Update 31 Patch 4 was released, which was funny in and of itself because they couldn't decide on what number it was until Jerry finally said, you know what, this is patch 4 and we're moving on. Some stuff that changed. The Artifer's Arachno Technician's arcane mechanism now works correctly, as does auto repairs. And Deepwood Stalkers from Ranger Merciful Shot should now use ranged power instead of melee power. Let's see, combat mastery items now function correctly. Spell focus now properly adds to all DC schools. Deception's tooltip now displays properly, and Epic Rift Maker's force damage and glow now functions. Some other stuff that they looked at. 100 Halls of Eating Star. They implemented changes that should help identify a cause for why the doppelganger fight sometimes fails to function correctly. This may also reduce the number of times the issue may occur. And for what goes up, they created a workaround for an issue that could prevent some players from repeating the quest. Affected players should now speak with Sharad, then speak with Kara Patwin, the heroic arc giver for the Stormhorns, and follow the prompts to repair what goes up. Taking an arc reward from the heroic Stormhorns arc should allow Sharad to speak with them again. If the workaround does not resolve your issue, please submit a bug report so they can identify further fixes. Let's see, bonus days for the weekend. Through today, you can get a Mysterious Remnants and +2 loot bonus weekend. Loot boost bonus weekend. Starts and it goes through today. Store news. So sales for the week through July 28th. 20% off of Astral Shards, Guild Renown Elixirs, 50% off of Guild Charters and Guild Airship Beacons. You can also buy +7 tomes for the week, if you would like to do so. The freebie for the week. Bigby's Blue Guiding Hand ×5. Fantastic. I've been waiting for this to come as a freebie so I can play with them. I'm looking forward to that. This is some people were trying to figure out what to use them for, and very quickly the chat channels that Ash and I are in settled on two things: pointing players in the right direction and pretending to point players in the right direction. Beware, not all hands will be as helpful as you may want them to be. All right, we're going to move into community news. We have two chronicles here, so we'll start with the 197th Chronicle, which was 2 weeks ago. Og has some great info on utilizing RSS feeds for the DDO forums. Even Note is live streaming DDO every Sunday starting at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, which is fantastic. The Munchkin Summer Games continued. I think they've got a few more weeks still. Guild for the week. I like this guild name. Your part-time guild is a Wayfinder-based guild that might be the largest in DDO. The guild has more than 750 active members. That's a lot. The guild brings together many players on Wayfinder for questing and raiding. I don't mean I'm not trying to slam Wayfinder or anything. I didn't realize Wayfinder had 750 active people on it.
They're all in that
Let alone
guild.
in one guild.
It's a one guild server.
It's pretty awesome. I don't think 750 is the largest, or certainly not of all time, because there was a guild on Kyber that I think had maxed out.
Yeah, there were a couple.
Yeah, when some guild changes were made, they were pretty big for a while. I don't think they still are, but
No, I don't think so either.
Chronicle comment for the week. Halflings don't get mad, they blank.
Get drunk. Cheats.
That works. I was going to say dance.
They are good dancers.
They are good dancers. Let's see. Fansite news. DDOCast got a shout out for our last show on spell selection for clerics, favored souls, and paladins. DDO Players News looked at Can's crafting changes, or upcoming changes in episode 92. DDO Gamer also looked into those changes. Enrique extolled the virtues of wands, and Bonnie View traveled to the island of Lost Cosmetics. She had a lot of pictures of cosmetics that, under the new cosmetic system, lost some layers, we'll say. Let's see. The 198th Chronicle. Shikaijo Explored DDO is the newest show on DDO stream. Amundir is creating a new character planner, which looks pretty fun. Let's see. You had your final teaching raid this weekend.
Yep, it's all over for the year. We'll hope to bring them back after the new year, but the teaching raids are done on Sarlona. But if you're interested in running with the High Lords, we do have 2 public events every week, our Tuesday Abbot Fest and our Friday Mark of Death Fest, and details are in the Sarlona forum.
Karandras is an Orion-based guild looking for new players to join them. The guild is level 55 and looking at running all content. The comment for this week: what happens when an adventurer tries to use a maul to hammer a nail?
You get a one-hit wonder.
Nice. Very well done. Maul to hammer a nail. I would say if they try to do that, they have to roll an attack roll. Roll a d20. If I was the DM,
Watch out for your thumb.
yeah. If I was the DM and my players wanted to do that, you know for dang sure that I'd tell them to roll a d20. And I also know that with my player, the group that I was playing with, it would be a 1. Because that's just how that's where that always happens.
Don't bog your crew down with minutia. Just let them do it. You gotta let your people do what they want to do sometimes. That was one of my problems as a DM.
I'd let them hammer the nail. It just might be a little more comical. Let's see. Fansite news. DO Players News got a shout out for the 93rd episode. Order of Sankatka delves into Zen Archer builds again. DO Gamer remembered older content in a new blog post. Mostly that blog post was increase the drop rates of old stuff. Increase the drop rates of old stuff. Even suffered asteroid rage, and Mickey soloed the Shroud. Very well done. It pretty much still doesn't matter what level you run, even on Heroic Shroud. Soloing the Shroud is an achievement.
Yeah, that's a milestone in your DDO career.
Yeah.
If you haven't tried soloing Shroud yet, do it, because it's cool. You really have a new appreciation for it, and well done.
Yep. Let's see. Severlin dropped a hint about a future plan. We've talked about that. Cordovan and Solorian were interviewed by Shane Plays about DDO and Lotro, which we'll link to in the show notes. It was kind of a fun listen to. They're talking about Turbine and the changes to the game, to the studio a little bit, but mostly they're talking about Lord of the Rings and DDO from those two guys' perspective. Let's see. DDO Reporter looked at D&D in Hollywood, which is kind of a fun read as well. Let's see. Videos this week. Streaming with Even. We mentioned this is live every Sunday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, usually on Thalanis and usually on Evernote, and usually looking for more people to run with. Voodoo Spice had his video, Ice Storm versus Fireball, which we've referenced a few times. Which I think we pretty much covered everything that was in the video. You can check that out. I just mentioned it from the Chronicle. Shane Plays Radio had Jerry and what was his forum name, Solorian, for an interview. It starts at about 28 minutes in to the radio show. But if you want to listen to some talk about Pokemon Go and some news about Pokemon Go and some thoughts on that, you can listen to before that. Blogs this week. Some information from them. So DDO Central hit 15,000 followers, which is pretty impressive. And far above what I'm at. And I think also far above what DDO itself is actually at. Let's see. Order of Celestica, his Wisdom to Stop Time build. This was kind of what they're talking about. This Archer build, which is looking at utilizing paralyzing from Rangers tree. Let's see. Mickey's Delirium featured her Solar Raider build, so you can look at what she was doing there. DDOCast news. DDOCast Splat is still going. We will hopefully have another member. This week.
Hopefully so.
Let's see. Ash was supposed to join us last week, but had some stuff come up. But we're looking forward to having him in the group. We're going to be starting Necro 3, so we'll be continuing our permadeath adventures, which involve a lot of dying, actually. So there you go. General gaming news. So I pulled a few things out that were kind of interesting, not because they apply to DDO, but kind of the ramifications. One was from World of Warcraft. I know, we're not supposed to. So with their new their new expansion or patch or whatever they call their updates to the game, they introduced a new silence penalty, which will hopefully provide a useful midpoint between banning players and simply silencing those who others find continually offensive. So when a player is reported for offensive behavior in chat and the report holds up under review, a silence penalty will be implemented, preventing players from inviting others to groups, talking in general channels, or even sending mail to other players. The first implementation, the silence penalty, will last for 24 hours, and each subsequent penalty will double with no upward limit. For example, your 10th penalty would last for about 512 days, or a year and a half, which is pretty crazy. Not that I have a problem, but what did you guys think about that kind of a penalty? And do you think DDO should look at something similar?
That's a long penalty at the end of it.
Well, that was 10. That's also 10 offenses, though. That's
true too. Yeah. I mean, I think that something would be nice, but I worry about the how do they really determine if the offensive behavior actually occurred?
Well, it does say the report holds up under review, which implies that they have people to review it, which I don't know that Turbine really has spare people to do that right now.
Yeah, that would be the trick, yeah, because otherwise you could get griefing the other way, too.
I thought it was interesting, though, from a standpoint of a game where I'm pretty sure we've all probably run into players that were offensive and we didn't want to listen to and we squelched them. So... let's see, the other thing was Massively Overpowered looked at death in MMOs and was asking which MMO does the most with death mechanics, which I thought was kind of an interesting read. And DDO has had, I guess we've only really had two things with death mechanics, but they did change our death mechanics a while back. Long time ago, you actually lost XP when you died. Which...
I like that idea.
I'm glad I wasn't playing back then.
I've actually thought of it recently that maybe it would be more appropriate for you to lose XP if you release from a dungeon from being dead. But then you start getting into problems with lag and lag wipes and stuff like that in raids, and it's kind of not a great idea anymore.
Well, you get the re-entry penalty, and you lose a bonus if you die.
True.
So.
It is true. And I mean, look, you do lose time too, so it's not like you don't lose anything at all. But I would say that I'm fairly I'm fairly happy with our current mechanics of death too. So, but there was some interesting talk in there about some more creative ways of dealing with death mechanics. So, lightning post this week. We've got a couple things from our continuing our discussion of spell selection. Fuzzy Duck wrote in last week regarding our divine classes, clerics, favorite souls, and paladins. For low to mid levels, he keeps spell point based healing for mid combat with quicken, and for healing outside, he tends to use potions and the strongest wand or scroll he is able to remember. And he also says that scrolls can be used 2 levels before the spell can actually be added to the spellbook, though with a failure chance, which is a good thing to mention. He said Close Wounds is an interesting little healing spell, not hugely powerful, but it's cheap. He does say Find Traps is still good for a proper divine, since the inside bonus it grants scales with level, meaning combined with a good search item, you'll be able to get a search skill that's still pretty competitive with a proper trapper and let you find hidden doors, which is a great use of that spell, actually, and not one that we mentioned. He did say that turning undead can still be effective if you spec out a bit. The Plusher's enhancements allowing you to do direct damage for a Sun Elf. He does take Remove Disease and Poison spells since they give lingering 100% immunity for longer than the potions. Divine Power as well as to hit attack speed. PRR and MRR also base off of base attack bonus, which we did not mention. So that's a great point as well. Let's see. Greater Command is great for low will save mobs like boots and archers. The only problem with you doing Greater Restoration Scrolls is you need to use them on yourself. You can find yourself kind of screwed since each negative level is going to be -2 to all skills, so which is a fair point. Let's see, other things he mentioned. He said the only problem with the Sunbolt freebie for Favored Soul is you're basically required to use a lesser Heart of Wood in order to get it, which is true. And he says Vampirum Shard still works, but only if you can get a hold of the old pre-augment version of the Necklace of Vol. So it'd be nice to get access to that. Let's see, Amber Cyan wrote in and said, and also pointed out that base attack bonus from Divine Power is also helpful with PRR. So that can be really helpful. No one mentioned any of the level summon monster lines, and there's one at every level. Yes, that's true. We didn't mention them. We just don't tend to use them. I know there are people who do use summon spells, but I think I'm guessing your guys' experience is probably very similar to mine. You don't see people use summon spells in general very often ever. Even in epic levels, people don't even tend to summon their artificer or druid pets. It's pretty much people just go with what they got. Have you guys had a different experience?
I've never been a fan of summons in general, and I don't see a lot of other people doing it too much. Unless there's a lever to pull or something like that, they'll bring the artificer dog out. But other than that, no.
Yeah, I gave up on them a long time ago. They just don't hold their own, especially as you increase in level. So I would like summoning to be more viable. I think it could be fun, but right now they just die so quickly.
Yeah, and I think part of we tend to run in epic levels. Amber Cyan wrote in that he uses the hell out of summons while running heroics. Running at level elites, he finds them useful. He'll even take hires that bring a summon. There are a few enhanced trees that can buff them a lot, but unless you're going for flavor build or just for the fun of it, that are mostly traps. Let's see, Idol wrote in. He asked if he's the only one who never liked Blade Barrier. Probably yes. There's a chance of that. There's probably other people who don't really like it.
Blade Barrier is so huge.
I think
It's amazing.
a lot of people really like it. He said once he reaches epics, he puts it off to the side and uses it on the occasion that he'll be on the run. He's just more of a fan of the light cannon clerics that use light spells, and Comet Fall, which is kind of an anti-Blade Barrier spell, which is true. I would say to each their own. If you like going that route, go that route by all means.
I will say that Blade Bearer has less value in a party typically than when you're soloing or duoing or something. Or it becomes tougher for the favored solar cleric to have the aggro and be able to kite them properly.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't seem to be as effective once you start getting into epic levels and get up there and epic elite and stuff like that. T-Lord also wrote in about spells. Here's some of his thoughts. Level 1 spell, Bane is an enchantment spell. No spell resistance, has a short cooldown, low SP cost, and it's good for enchantment augmentation to spam for -10 to will saves, which I didn't realize it had that high of a penalty to will saves. Cause fear on a will save will still cause the target to be shaken, thus provides a -2 saves as well. Let's see, he said Close Wounds has a free quicken feat on it while healing. A cleric spec for partial healing, it can heal upwards of 500 hit points in epics, which is a great point. Let's see. He's talking about Holy Smite, Order's Wrath, Chaos Hammer, and Unholy Blight. They have no spell resistance, and Holy Smite gives a 6-second blindness on Order's Wrath gives 6-second daze, and their cooldowns are shorter than the actual duration. Thus, you can continually crowd control mobs depending on their alignment, which is kind of a neat little trick. Let's see. Poison still has the old school ability to be empowered, maximized, and heightened. In Heroics, you can hit mobs for upwards of 60+ con damage, which is pretty ridiculous. You'd think that would kill something outright, or at least, zero con doesn't actually kill anyone anymore. But it does. It can incapacitate you. Level 5, Break Enchantment can be used to cast. Can be cast to remove symbols with no check prior to a symbol being activated. It also clears cloud spells. And he says Holy Aura is still not working correctly in that it affects allies and mobs. Also, the immunity to enchantment or charm spells does not work against mobs that cast Symbol of Stunning, and a few other things I think as well. Our survey question for the week comes from Teutonic Drone on Canith. If you could design a quest in DDO, what would it look like? I would have lots of puzzles and lots of mean traps. And probably some pretty crazy encounters, because I think those are the three things that when I was a DM, my players mentioned a few times as being fairly typical of my dungeon creation. What do you guys? What about you guys? If you could design a dungeon, what would it look like?
I like quests that require you to accomplish multiple objectives simultaneously, splitting the party up. That's always fun.
Mine would have dramatic music, mobs with dramatic effects, and I would really like to see a mechanic put it. Well, my quest would include like multiple exclusive paths. So when you did the quest, you would have to decide, okay, we're gonna take the forest or we're gonna take the sewers, and there's gonna be different loot options based on if you go this way or that way, and you cannot do them both. You can rerun the quest, but it's going to be one or the other when you're in there, and that will lead maybe to a different ending or a different way to get to the ending. Maybe this way is quicker, but the other longer way has better loot or something like that.
All right. So with that, we'll close out the show here. Voodu, do you want to mention your channel?
So I got my official DDO fan site YouTube channel with over 350 quest videos, raid videos, tutorials, crafting guides, all kinds of good stuff. There are fun series as well. Lots of information on there about Caster Druid and lots of information about Warlock. All my videos are narrated, and they are more geared towards newer players or even experienced players that feel like they still have stuff to learn. But it's not like a power gaming channel by any means.
Ash, you want to mention anything?
I may be going Kasplat in 2 days. Other than that, not really.
You will be going Kasplat. It's kind of a thing we do.
3? Wow.
Yeah. So thanks for listening to the show, and thanks to the people in the chat room, and thanks to Ash and Voodu for joining me today, and thanks to all the other contributors for DDOcast, and to Turbine and Wizards for making DDO happen and the support that they give us on the show, and thanks to Cyberz for hosting the podcast. You can hit us up at DDOcast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, swag, and other fun stuff. If you'd like to be part of the show or have a comment on this episode or any of our episodes, or if you have a question you'd like to hear us answer, topic you'd like to hear us debate on one of our debate shows, or if you'd just like to say hi, leave a comment or email us at docast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media and follow us for the latest cast updates. Our closing tip this week comes from Emmers on Argonesson. Find a good friend to run with. So until next time, may all your attack rolls be crits, all your chests level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to try Wolf and Bear Form.